Mambo Team Africa Worldwide. Habariya Sabui. Habariya Machana. Habariya Gioni. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Right now, we are starting our live. This is a rare occasion for me. I have been interviewed in the past, but this is the very first time being interviewed on my own platform. So that will be a little bit different. The name of today's live is The Road Back South, What Black People Should Do Now. And my esteemed guest is the brilliant Baruti. He is a modern day Imhotep, in my opinion. He's a mathematician, he's an engineer, and he's an architect all in one person. So when people say Imhotep and they greet themselves Hotep, we're not just talking about ancestors, but we're talking about some of our people that we can give flowers to today. So with that being said, I'm gonna turn over my platform to my guest and now host, Brother Baruti.
John Boy Ndugu, Asante Sana for the introduction. I appreciate your sentiments, and I do appreciate being on your platform today. And as you made reference, the title of the program is the Road Back South. Let me say, in recent months, there's been quite a lot of talk about the idea of Black people in the United States remigrating back to the southern part of the United States. A lot of this discussion has been sort of bolstered by a book called The Devil We Know by New York Times columnist Charles Blow. And of course, Charles Blow is not the only person that has advocated that. He's gotten a lot of publicity, of course, by his public persona of being a New York Times columnist. But I know you, Konata, have, as we've talked before, you've advocated, that as well, even before hearing about the discussion that Charles Blow has had on various networks and through his book. And I too had championed that in my own book, which is about 20 years old at this point, called Elephants in a Bamboo Cage, in which I talk about the same idea generally about the Southeast would be a great place for us to remigrate back to in terms of the geopolitical configuration of the United States. However, having said that, I want to get into kind of what I would call a discussion / interview with you. I want to start out by referencing an article that actually Charles Blow did. It's an article called "We Need a Second Great Migration," and this was an op-ed piece in the New York Times on January 8th. And I want to just point out a couple of ideas from the article, and then I want to get your reaction to it. In the article, it indicates that in the first census after the Civil War, it goes on to talk about there were 3 southern states, South Carolina, Mississippi, and Louisiana, that were majority Black at that time. It also points out that in Florida at the time, Black people were less than 2 percentage points away from constituting the majority. In Alabama, it was less than 3 percentage points. And in Georgia, it was just under 2 percentage points. It is noteworthy to state that the recent senatorial win for Raphael Warnock in Georgia was surrounded by the notion that this was the first time in United States history that a black majority coalition was able to put a black person in office in terms of the being a national senator. Also, in the same article that I referenced from Charles Blow, there's a person by the name of Brian Stevenson, who's the executive director of Equal Justice Initiative, who called the migrants that had migrated during this great migration away from the South, 1916 to 1970. He says that, and I quote, he refers to the migrants as refugees and exiles of terror. So, having said that, I would like to just get your thoughts on what I mentioned, and any way that you would like to start off the conversation about the road back south.
Okay, well, first I'll share a little bit about my personal background. I always consider myself a Southerner from the North, I would say. My parents were some of the last migrants from the South to come north, even though they had relatives who were already in the North. So I myself was born in a small town in Alabama. But I ever since I was a baby, I was in Detroit, and so I saw myself as a diehard Detroiter. And the thing is about this is a lot of people become very emotionally attached to the places where they grow up. I think African people in general, we're emotional people, and there's nothing wrong with that. But we have to know how to channel it and use it for our benefit rather than our detriment. So you have a lot of people who may live in a Detroit or Chicago or Milwaukee or New York or Philadelphia, who may think that those cities are part of their personality and who they are, and that they shouldn't leave. But the South is where it's at. I think it's at least 51% of us who already live in the Southeast currently, and really shouldn't have left. Most of us, we know that our parents or our grandparents or maybe even our great grandparents, if you're talking about somebody really young, came from the South. Now, a lot of people didn't have my experience where, I visited the South every summer and probably every other Christmas. So I always had that attachment, and I always considered that to be going home. And then when I was in undergraduate school at Eastern Michigan University, there was a big picnic during that time called the Freaknik. And so everybody would go down to Atlanta. And even though I never went to the Freaknik, I would go to an event called the Black College Radio Conference. That was like a week before that. And so at that time, everybody, we were all saying, we're going to move to Atlanta, we're going to move to Atlanta, we're going to move to Atlanta. Some of us did it, some of us didn't. I lived in Atlanta for a year. I lived in Columbus, Georgia for a year. I lived in Louisiana for a year and a half. And I lived in the DMV area, Washington, D.C., for a combination of 7 years. And I know a lot of people in D.C. They call people from the South Bamas, but you are south of the Mason-Dixie line. And the reason that the Capitol was located in Washington, D.C., was to appease Southerners, or it would have remained further north, like in Baltimore. So, with that being said, I've always had a love for the South. The weather is much better in the South. We had this freakish weather this year, and Florida was unaffected. You know that because you're down in Jacksonville, so Florida was unaffected, and that's our natural habitat is the South. We can't be our real selves even with Operating in the cold, like in Detroit, it's like it's cold half of the year. And it costs you, thousands and dollars just to keep from freezing to death. So, and we know those of us who have worked in corporate America, you get in these office buildings, and these Europeans, they keep the air conditioner on blast. You have to keep a blazer on the back of your seat, or a lot of sisters are walking around in sweaters in the summertime, because they're not going to make the climate comfortable for you. They're going to make the climate comfortable for them. So that's just some of the basics. I don't want to go on too long because I know some of your questions will probably be pertaining to whatever I was about to say next. So.
Well, let me ask you a question. Thank you for that. Is there echo in the background for me?
It's a little bit of an echo.
Okay. Is there anything I can do about the echo? Well, I don't hear it now, so
Yeah,
it's okay.
it's probably a double feedback. That's just your sound coming back through your speakers. So um
Okay.
yeah, so you might want to just put something over your speakers.
Okay. Um, let's see. Okay, let's see if that works. Can you still hear me clearly?
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay, good. Okay, maybe that worked. Okay, so some people have called some of these cities, like you mentioned, Detroit, Philly, Milwaukee, Chicago, New York, and I'll also throw in other places out west, like Los Angeles. They call them destination cities for Black people in the migration that took place, as I said in the opening, from like say, the early 1900s to about 1970. So in other words, we went to those cities and we tried to create significant populations there, but in the states where those cities are, we didn't really constitute much in the way of a population there. So therefore, it's just destination cities outside the South. But if we look at the South in general, we're kind of like spread out throughout the massive regions of the South. I bring that up because if we're talking about a move back, and you said that people are attached to places where they are they individually attached to those cities like Detroit, Philly, Milwaukee, or are they attached to the state? And if that's so, how can that idea about the attachment from the destination city be broken so that, or diluted rather, so that they will want to come back south? And what would be the advantages you think in moving back south other than the weather?
Well, I believe that one, people have to have a sense of history. It's like me being a Pan African. I know that even though I'm an African American, I'm here by way of being African, so that doesn't change. And it's pretty much the same way we gotta look at the history of the South. Like the majority. I know there were free blacks in the North during slavery, but for the most part, the majority of black people, our history in the United States began in the Southeast. So migrating to the Southeast would be a bit of a homecoming. Um, Basically, we were ran out of the South by racists due to just lack of opportunity. Um, and so, because we know we went from slavery to sharecropping, and then a lot of people was working on the railroads, and then they were coming up with all these crazy laws, anything they can think of to lock you back up, and that was discussed in I forget the sister's name wrote the book Slavery by Another Name, where she basically just talked about all these laws that they will come up with to lock brothers up and put you right back in prison and have working for free all over again. And so I understand why we migrated north. Henry Ford, he put out a announcement that he would pay anybody $5 a day to work on his assembly line, regardless of their skin color. So things like that made people come north, but we really should have stayed. The benefits, other than the weather, are whenever you are in a majority, that's power. People always try to look down on black cities like Detroit. I don't consider Detroit to be a black city anymore because even though we're still in the majority of the population, um, we've been gentrified out of downtown, out of midtown. We have a white mayor now. We no longer have two black House representative members. So, but the reason, people can always look at these so quote unquote black cities and say, well, they're not successful, but they don't look at the fact that cities are always located in a state. And even though we're the majority in Detroit, we've never been the majority in Michigan. And so a mayor can only be as strong as the support that mayor gets from the governor. If you have the mayor and the governor with different interests, it's not going to work out well for that city because um, a city can decide that it wants to do one thing, and the government in the capital of that state can just say no. To give one example, even though gambling isn't the best thing in the world, I'll give this example. The city of Detroit wanted to. We saw that the auto industry was going down, and so we wanted to become a casino city, like Atlantic City in Vegas. We wanted to do that for a long time, and the citizens of the city of Detroit voted to legalize casino gambling in Detroit on more than one occasion. And each time, the state government just said no, and we couldn't, and we weren't allowed to have these casinos. And it wasn't until the Canadians across the river in Windsor, Ontario, they said, well, okay, Detroiters want casinos, we'll give them casinos. So they built a riverboat casino and one on land, Caesars Casino. And it wasn't until the state saw how much money was leaving Detroit every day going across the border to Canada, they said, okay, you Negroes can have casinos. And now we're a casino city. I think we have like 4 casinos now. And I think our MGM casino makes more than the one in Vegas. But that's just one example of how the city really can't govern itself unless it is lockstep with the governor or the state government. And so we need to strive not to have black cities, but to have black states.
So you were making the argument that in these destination cities, even if we have significant populations in them, that we're in a delusion if we think that really represents power. That at any time, under so many examples, our ability to be even empowered in those cities is neutralized because the state generally represents a majority white enclave that can suffocate the economic prowess within the city. All right.
This is
Now,
true. I mean, it goes. Is another example I can give is the fact that the Metro Detroit probably has the most developed suburbs in America because we were not not just separated, which I think separation is a good thing, but we were segregated for a long time, and Detroit was treated like Havana by the corporate America, and therefore we were basically under sanctions. So whenever they built a department store or a fancy restaurant, they would build it out of the city limits, and so a lot of the attractions that other cities have within their city limits. You have to drive outside of the city limits to enjoy those things in Detroit. And that was all because they did not agree with who we decided to vote for mayor.
Well, okay. So let's say you have Black people thinking about moving back south, and this is a trend. There are significant amounts of Black people beginning to move to southern areas, particularly for jobs, particularly young professionals, who want to move to southern areas for varying reasons. And I noticed as we've been talking, we've mentioned a couple of terms: the South, the Southeast, and I want to throw in another term, the Deep South. Now, to many people, these are different things. When people say the South, sometimes they're talking about the so-called 13 southern states, including Texas. But a lot of people would not consider Texas to be the Southeast, but it's in the South. So people think of the Southeast as the lower right corner of the South, as in the 13 southern states. And then the Deep South is generally considered the areas of the 13 southern states that are seemingly to the right of Texas, but below Tennessee. Okay, so do you care which term we use? Are those significant by the fact that I tried to define these areas differently? Or when you're saying the Southeast, you just mean the South period, including Texas or whatever people consider the 13 southern
Well,
states?
it really depends on context. I mean, when I speak historically about Black people coming from the South, I was referring to all of the South. But when I talk about migrating today and doing that as a political strategy, I think that we need to be as concentrated as possible. In my previous videos, I didn't include Texas, but I was saying from Maryland, Delaware area all the way across to Louisiana is where we should live. But then I thought about it, and I did the numbers, and the current population of Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, and South Carolina, that's approximately 50 million people, and so that area could hold us. I'm not talking about us seceding from the United States. I'm talking about us just uh, repopulating United States, states within the United States, and being in the position to elect the governors, being in positions to elect the senators. If we had control of those four states, that would be eight senators. That's power. And then at the same time, you got electoral college votes. So whoever is running for president, they would have to come see us. We remember a couple elections back. It was a big fight over whether or not there had been voter suppression in Florida. Florida decided who the president was, and then just in this past election, Georgia is given credit for deciding who the president is, and so now they've come up with some new laws to try to suppress future voting in Georgia. So, and my thing is, I'm all about just we don't need a big plan. It wasn't a big plan to move north. It doesn't have to be a big plan to move south. All we would have to do is go. I think this is a plan for people who are afraid to move to Africa. I personally, my plan is to move to Africa. But if you don't want to go there or you can't get there for whatever reason, then I think this is the next best step.
Okay, so let me bring up a couple of things. One is, well, I want to ask you something. Your recent trip to Kenya, and also your prior trips to Africa in general. Do you think that this is giving you a big picture of the U.S. and the conditions of Black people, that you feel like your travels and your goal to move to Africa is giving you a different idea about what would be best for the Black people who live in the United States? Can you say
Yeah,
something about that? How have you been helped by your
a,
ideas on Africa?
a little bit. I mean, everybody knows that African countries have their challenges and their problems. That's no secret. And they have a different view of Europeans that we do, because of the fact that they do control their own countries, even though there may be a hidden hand that influences their leadership. Overall, they're still in control of those countries, whether we want to believe it or not, and it's just feels so good to drive down the street and look at bulletin boards, and it's black families on the bulletin boards. It's a black man, it's a black woman, and it's a black child smiling, advertising the product. And I'm like, wow, I was just thinking, so I've never haven't seen this in such a long time. It's almost unheard of in the United States for there to be a black man of my complexion, a sister of my complexion, holding a baby of my complexion, advertising a product in the United States. You rarely ever see it, and so that's just one example of when you are in the minority, things just have to go a particular way.
So if Black people in significant amounts move back to the South and would become a majority in a couple of states, that would act as a sort of a African geo region. I I thought about when you said that, in that article that I referenced by Charles Blow. It said that the South, he was putting in context, has made, uh, quite a bit of racial progress, so to speak, even in reference to other parts of the United States. And I quote when he said that, that the South is sort of for Black people, maybe a country within a country. And he goes on to say, kind of Africa in America. And I kind of thought about that when you start talking about what does it mean to be in the majority, because there are about 50 million African American people in the United States. And if we were to look at African countries in terms of sovereign countries, that would put us at about the seventh or eighth largest African country in terms of actual population. So, in fact, by becoming the majority of people in any of a number of states, that would constitute a quote unquote cultural country by demographics, so that at least we would have our imagery and presence, more visible. Now, having said
Yeah,
that,
yeah, I would. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, go ahead. I remember what I'm going to say afterwards. Go ahead, please.
Okay. I just when you bring up, I just want to just make a point that there is a region of the United States called New England. That's the northeastern part of the United States. There's not a separate country. They didn't secede. That's Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, Connecticut. No, maybe not Connecticut, but Massachusetts. Um, and I guess I would say that Boston is probably the de facto capital of New England. And they don't have to say black people don't come here, or black people are not welcome here. It's black people who live in Boston. But the thing about it is, when you go to New England, The architecture is even different. When you go to New England, you know who that place belongs to. And that's just what it is. When you know their basketball team is called the Celtics. You know, you got black people running around shooting basketball with clovers on, calling themselves the Celtics, or the Celtics would be the right pronunciation. So it's about that European history. And then they at the same time their football team is called the Patriots. And when they show you that picture of that Patriot, even though they changed the image over the years, it's always a European man. You know, so we know what New England is. So if Europeans can have, a New England, why can't we have a New Nubian?
Right, right. Well, I see. However, I want to bring to your attention a few discussion items that I want you to weigh in on surrounding this idea about, and I'll say, where South, WHERE, where South. Okay, so surrounding the Charles Blow interviews and then other people weighed in on this subject, I believe in some of his commentary, he talks about where South sort of being off of
Oh! You know what? I'm sorry. It's actually we actually have a troll in the comment section who was asking whether or not we want to live around white people, and he said they don't want to live around us, and the entire United States is a European corporation. I understand that. He said we can't have the South, and it says the back to Africa is absolutely the best idea for everyone. Um, I agree. I agree. Back to Africa is the best idea for everyone. I don't have a problem living around European people. I mean, if somebody's nice to me, I'm nice to them. You treat me good, I treat you good. But I want to live in somewhere where I see the majority of my people. Um, I can't say that. I mean, he's saying all black people in America should go to Africa. I agree. I mean, maybe he's thinking he's making me upset with that, but he's not. My thing is, logistically, how would you help us make that happen, Bravo 46? How logistically, how would you help us get all African Americans to relocate back to Africa, and pretty much make it worth our while? I know, coming from where the from the perspective that you might have based on the things that you said so far, that you might not believe we built this country, but we did. Not just with labor, but also with our
inventions too.
inventions. I mean, we actually designed the capital city, Washington D.C., and we built the buildings that are in the capital. So if you are in favor of all of us moving back to Africa, how do you feel about reparations? Because I would tell you that if you forgave all my debt, all my student loans, and wrote me a check for $500,000, I would give you your passport. So, what do you have to say about that? He said
See,
mixing with
responding.
black. He said mixing with black people will ruin your race. Mixing with Europeans will ruin our race. So I ask again, what is your stand, Bravo 46, on helping to facilitate the logistics that it would take to relocate 50 million of my Watu back to our homeland of the continent of Africa, which is better than North America anyway. Well, how would you help us? I'm in full agreement with you. So how can you How can you help us facilitate this?
Can I continue to ask you a few ideas?
Sure, sure. I just wanted to answer that because I didn't notice. I didn't notice that this person had made several comments, so I didn't want to be rude and just
Right,
ignore their questions.
right. We're going to get back to some of those points that he made. I assume it's a he, but let's get back to a few of them that he made because I'm thinking about it as you were reading those chat comments. Something I wanted to mention to you, kind of like in the discussion about where South. I think some people think that in the Charles Blow analysis, it's really about moving to southern spaces. Maybe there might be like 9 states. I think he may have advocated that are sort of off of the I-20 expressway. Um, Sort of the idea that if you were to dominate the major cities along those routes, that you would eventually create clusters of a sort of a power base. That's one idea. There are other people who would just say, move south, period. And there would be some people who would say there would be specific states. Now, let me mention, for example, um, South Carolina and Mississippi. There are some who advocate, and I think there was a YouTube group by the name of Be the Power that talked about South Carolina and Mississippi. They pinpointed those states because they believe those states have small populations. For example, South Carolina, about 5 million people, and I believe Mississippi with closing in on 4 million. Now, the reason why I'm pointing out those two as referenced by others is because they believe that strategic political power will be based upon a critical mass of certain black people or certain amounts of black people moving to those states so that black people became the majority in those states fairly quickly. And that, so for example, they think, well, okay, if you had like 800,000 black people who moved to South Carolina, then black people would be the majority, where South Carolina may have closing in on 40% black today, and say Alabama may be 35 to almost 40%. You had around 800,000 black people moving there. So some people would dismiss a state like Florida, and they would say, oh, well, there are 21 million people living in Florida. And so even though, as I pointed out in the opening, that Florida had maybe 2 percentage points away from being a majority black state at the time, right after the Civil War, that for black people to think about moving to Florida would be useless politically because it would take too many people to become the majority. So with these ideas in reference to that, what is your idea about where South, and what do you think of those comments by others about moving to strategic cities in the South or specific states with small populations?
No, I would want all the states to border one another, all the areas to border one another. I don't want to be spread out where we have a state then skip a states. I don't think logistically that would be the best move.
Why is that?
One thing I would say about Florida, because it's still division, it's still divided. And so
See, they aren't
then
thinking. I mean,
you gotta pass through, then you gotta pass through another state that's not your state to get to another one of your states. Now, I'd rather not do that. What I would say about Florida is that even though we're not in the majority of Florida, the actual largest number of African Americans in the country are in Florida. So that can't be overlooked. I wanted to get back to
what I think
to
this
the
is an
person.
important point.
I just want to answer the person. The person, Bravo 46, he or she did say that they are in favor of some type of reparations that could be in the form of transporting Africans to Africa and a bit of startup money. See, it would have to be more than that. I just flew to Kenya and back for like $600. So and a bit of startup money. So yeah, you're not gonna get me to give up the United States for $1,000. And also you have to think about it from a political level. We will also need to obtain citizenship wherever we end up. So I tell you what, Bravo 46, you go to your senator, um, you go to your senators for your state. You write up some legislation. That's how it's done. You write the legislation, you give it to them, and tweak it, and you tell them that you want them to negotiate with the African Union, that African Americans can receive instant citizenship upon arrival to their countries, and you come up with a number that's doable for everything that me and my ancestors have gone through at the hands of races, and also to compensate us for what we put into this country, and I'll be all for that.
I do think that the Congressional Black
it
Caucus
is the funniest
also
thing.
would be.
I mean, this is the last time I'm comment to this person, but they says, "Well, we're going to do it without your say anyway." All I can
Okay.
say is try
Okay.
it.
I do think
Try
that
it.
the
Try it. Try it. That's all I can say. Try it. Try to kick us out the country without our say. We've been, we're good people. We're a warm-hearted people. And but just try that. Just try that and see how well it works out for this country.
I do think that the Congressional Black Caucus is one body that we should be able to hold accountable for helping to do what you just said. They would be a body that should be able to speak on our behalf to African countries about dual citizenship as a body. And I say that because the majority of people who are the constituents of the Congressional Black Caucus are Black people who are elected basically from Black districts, except for senators, which are statewide elections. Most Black representatives are from carved out niche districts that are predominantly Black. So I think they would be a body that could be held accountable for that. But I do want to go back to this point about where South. It seems like in other people's commentary, when they're thinking about, okay, how can we flip the demographics quickly in a state like Alabama, or I'm sorry, in a state like Mississippi, or in a state like South Carolina, they aren't thinking about it in the same way that you are. They're thinking about, okay, well, you might be able to get some additional senators from Mississippi, or you might get some additional senators, Black, from South Carolina. I think when your comment was made about you would like contiguous states, I think you're thinking of the South in terms of our power on a in a regional, almost country-like basis. Do I do I
Well,
interpret that correctly?
I would just say rather than country, I just say region. I'll go back to my example of
Right,
New England.
right,
New England are states that border one another.
right. Okay. Well, yeah, I agree. I agree with that idea. When I think of moving back south, I think of states that are contiguous. You
It's
we
it's
got
it's funny. It's funny how history. Most people in America don't know history. White Americans didn't free any slaves. First of all, my people weren't slaves. They were enslaved Africans. They were Africans who were kidnapped and put under a slavery system. They weren't slaves. They were human beings. And second to that, we weren't freed. We freed ourselves. Most of the major battles that were won by American soldiers. All right, I'm sorry.
Okay. Earlier when we were talking about I said why move south aside from the weather, and then you start getting into the political ideas, some cultural ideas about how we would be empowered. I just want to read to you or say to you a couple of things and just kind of get your reaction. Okay, so people generally put culture, or say culture is the totality of any people's long-term experiences, both past, present, and their visions for the future. And he put this in 7 major areas or compartments, right? And these are economics, politics, social development, mythology, creative arts, ethos, which is like the personality of a people, and history. So taking that into consideration, all of it, from all those layers of culture, if we were to move back to the South, contiguous states, as you said, where we became, say, somewhere of the majority, and we would begin to operate the region in our interest, as you referenced New England, how would we be able, how do you see us being able to empower ourselves on a cultural level, given the layers of culture that I mentioned previously?
Well, there's already a lot of African culture in the South. A lot of what we refer to as Southern culture is actually African culture. We're just not educated on the ways of our ancestors to know that's what it is. Just the whole respecting of elders and being hospitable. Those are the African ways. Eating with your fingers, eating greens with cornbread. I mean, I spent the last 3 weeks in Nairobi, and all I ate was greens and cornbread. Bread. They call their cornbread ugali. But it's still made out of cornmeal. They don't use collards. They mostly use kales and other grains. It's like the favorite meat of the Lua people is chicken. So
Right.
they're all the way on the east side of the continent. So imagine how much we have in common with the people on the west side of the continent. So the African culture is there. It just may need to be cultivated a little bit. And one way I think to do that is by language. I think language is extremely important. I think it brings people together, and I think language divides people when they can't communicate. And so I'm a student of Kiswahili, and I plan to study Kiswahili until I reach the stage where I become a Kiswahili teacher. And I think once we start to speak our own language and name ourselves and not think that our names are Joe and Brian and William and Lisa and Mary, um, but our names are Kwame and Zinga and so forth. I think that will build up our own confidence in ourselves, and it also, in turn, cause non-Africans to respect us more.
Well, I agree. And I just want to pull up African basket from South Carolina
Yeah.
as an indication of what you're saying. Also, regarding the language, like Kiswahili, since you brought that up, I think one of the powerful steps, even in that, would be right now. Black people can name their organizations by African names. That is powerful in itself. With that, not to mention the idea about the sort of demographic transformation of states. You would began on a level where you could start renaming streets and things like that. I have though something I kind of want to bring up with this. Okay, so it took about 50 years for the so-called Great Migration to occur from Black people who are over 90% of Black people live in the South before 1900. And with these kinds of shifts, and I wrote down a figure that has been mentioned that prior to the Great Migration, Black people made up, as an example, 55% of the population in South Carolina. But after the Great Migration, say late 60s, 1970, Black people made up about 30% of the population in South Carolina. Now it's back up to about 40, a little over 40% now, but that's say over the past 50 years since 1970, basically, that there's been a remigration back to the state. So essentially, between the pre-migration and the post-migration, South Carolina's Black population lost about 25 percentage points. So it took a little while for Black people to move. And of course, the long-term movement did affect the demographics in the South. But it doesn't seem like the move back South will be something that will come quickly.
Well, I actually think
go on.
I actually think that it will happen it can happen. It can, if we want to, could happen at a rapid pace. Things are much different than it was back in the day. I mean, people have Black people have access to much larger sums of money today as we did as in the past. We have a lot of us are entrepreneurs and own our own business. A lot of us have professions where we work remotely, where our job is wherever we can take our laptops. Almost everybody, if there's 5 people in the house these days, like 5 people have cars. You know, back in, I can remember even back growing up as a kid in the 70s, most of the times it was a family car. It was one car for the entire family. And if you wanted to go on a date, you had to ask to borrow the family car. That's now we have a situation where people got pickups, people have SUVs. We could pack up and go anytime we want. We have money, so it would be different. It wouldn't take 50 years. I don't even think it would take 5 if we put our minds to it.
Okay. All right. So here's an idea within that. Okay, so we've got Black people in sizable quantities spread out throughout the South, not just in major cities of the South, but throughout various states. All right, so I remember at one point you mentioned, not necessarily on this show, but just in some of our previous conversations, for the idea about contiguous states having seaports, because within this we would want to, as states do, have trade, commerce with other nations, the luring of businesses, etc. I want to make reference to the fact that BMW for the past 25 years has been building cars in South Carolina, Spartanburg, South Carolina to be exact, amongst some other places in the state. And in Mobile, Alabama, the giant competitor for Boeing, which is Airbus, which is a European conglomerate, has been manufacturing airplanes in jets in Mobile. So the idea about foreign companies or international companies investing in states within the U.S. is already a reality. Now, so you mentioned that from Maryland to Florida, basically the southern Atlantic coast, basically, of the United States, that's where you would like to see kind of us to create those kind of hubs. Now, in your mind, given that we already kind of are spread out throughout the fabric of the South, in your mind, do you believe that it should be basically Black people who live in the North, the Midwest, and the West who move back south to create additional numbers in the areas that you're talking about? Or do you think that Black people who already live in the South should move themselves to other locations in the South to create this kind of hubbing, if I can point out such a term, in reference to you?
Maryland to Florida is good, but I will even go further to say, I think I mentioned it once, that I've even revised my idea to from North Carolina to Florida. So we can really, really be consolidated. And so yes, I think people who live in Texas should move east. I think people who live in Mississippi should move east. I think people who live in Kentucky, Tennessee, should move east. So I'm not limited to migration just for people who live outside the South, but also who are scattered throughout the South.
So you want to emptying basically of where Black people live right now completely into a few designated southern areas, as you say, from North Carolina to Florida, all together, not just Black people who are outside of the South moving to particular regions of the South, but you want an emptying of Black people who live. Let's just that North Carolina to Florida is basically the what I would call the Atlantic Southeast.
Mhm.
So you want everybody to move from wherever they are outside of those places into those spaces and concentrate there. So North Carolina to Florida, that'll be North Carolina, that'll be South Carolina, that'll be Georgia and Florida, 4 states.
Well, I think well, as far as the DMV goes, I think that those people are already in a pretty good situation. I mean, Prince George's County, Maryland, is the wealthiest Black county in the United States. A lot of Black people have who live within the district have some of the top jobs in the federal and local government. I just think, as far as relocating there, because I've done it more than once, is extremely hard because the prices are very high, the taxes are high, and also housing is very high there. $1 million does not even give you a mansion. It gives you just what we would consider in the Midwest to be a nice family home in that area. So that's why I no longer advocate for people moving to the DMV, but don't necessarily advocate for people who are already there doing well to leave. Um, I wouldn't say that I would say we are emptying everywhere else, because we know some of our brothers and sisters, they're not going to leave. They love they love the other people just too much, and they can't do without them. And
So you
so
want to just create a hub, though?
yeah,
Yeah, a hub. Okay.
definitely. Like I say, we probably, I mean, it's probably unrealistic to say that we will get all 50 million of us in 5 states, but or 4 states, but if we could get 2/3 of that, that would be a great accomplishment in my opinion, and I think that would be extremely beneficial as well.
Okay, so if I, somehow or another I get the impression, and you didn't say this on the show, but let me just throw something in, and I get your reaction. All right, so whether it be 2/3, and that would be essentially about 33 million if you got 50 million. But let's just say, I don't know, let's just say a quarter, even 10%, just some significant amount moving into these contiguous states, or hubbing, if you like. You didn't say it on this show, but I sort of gather that you may believe that the influx, or immigration rather, of Black people back to these areas of the South will in fact begin to change the demographics, not only because Black people are moving in, but depending upon the idea about white flight. Is this in any way something that you have thought about? And if it is, in terms of white flight, of white people saying, well, you know, Black people coming in, so I don't want to live around them, that this, in fact, what if the white people don't really want to leave?
Well, it's a free country. It's still the United States of America. People are free to live wherever they want to live. I'm not for necessarily chasing anybody out, but history just
Mm-hmm.
proves that they're only willing to tolerate living among so many of us, and that
Mm-hmm.
goes to prove with the gentleman or lady, for to lose those terms loosely. That was in the chat until I had to block them. They, that person says they don't want to live with us, and they want their country back, even though they're from Europe. But
Mm-hmm.
they want their country, and they just want us gone, and they don't owe us anything. So people of that mentality, you think they're gonna stay when we move? You
No.
know?
Well, in fact, it's interesting you should bring this up, because about 20 years ago or more, 25 now, there was a group, predominantly a white nationalist group, called the Americans for Self-Determination. I'll use the acronym ASD. They advocated, a peaceful settlement to the racial problem in the United States, and they thought that peaceful migration, voluntary migration of different races of people into sections of the U.S., contiguous regions, georegions, whatnot, would be a peaceful solution. And their idea was that since it was the U.S., they figured it was big enough to accommodate people, and that what should be done in terms of a reparations would be, they thought that whites generally were appalled at hearing the term reparations for Black people for slavery, systematic racism, white supremacy, domination, because whites thus thought that, well, Black people have already been given equal rights, they've had affirmative action, et cetera, or that whites did not want to feel today, contemporarily, that they were, in their mind, responsible for the actions of their ancestors. All right, so they put that in the past, and they were appalled at the notion of reparations. But the director of that organization, his name was Jeffrey Anderson, said that, okay, if there came to be some kind of compromise where whites would look at reparations as being an investment, and Black people could hear what I'm about to say as reparations, that what if the federal government, say, were to make an investment in the voluntary migration, where work out some kind of plan, let's just say, to work your idea about Black people moving to states, primarily North Carolina to Florida, that the government would help in the relocation process, and also you would have businesses that will relocate, so that if Black people felt like they wanted affirmative action, they could have affirmative action in the states that that the Black people were moving to, and other places in the United States, it would be predominantly white, would not have affirmative action at all. Now, it seems as though, not that I'm saying that you are for that plan or you're not for that plan, but that was an idea that was generated. So given that, if what would be the incentive if you didn't have some type of federal government program, even if, as you said, you would like to make it voluntary, or we should just do that, what would be the incentive for Black people to move? Let me put us in a couple of categories. Even the Black people who had, as you say, jobs that were not anchored down, where they could just basically move and they could use their computer wherever they were to be on a job. What would also cause them to want to move, and what would cause Black people to want to move to other states if it were not connected to jobs? For example, let's say somebody was not an entrepreneur, so therefore they were working at a particular job in a state, Chicago, Detroit, LA, or whatever. Could they just pick up and just leave and move to Florida? Or would the idea that the ASD had be actually more practical, even if one didn't like a federal government approach, because it would create incentives for people to move?
Well, I kind of wish you wouldn't have brought that up, but since you did, I'll say that I would not be in favor of that. My thing is we're always trying to work out arrangements with other people beforehand, be it the
No, that's what
government,
ASD was.
be it the government. I'm gonna say, but you just brought it up that they brought it up. That's what I'm saying. Me, I'm more better of a notion of help yourself first, do your own thing first. We do what we're going to do, and then once it's done, then we are in the position to say to make demands, not just requests but demands. If we all decide to relocate and we do that, we're here. We're not talking about it. We're not talking about it. We're
Right.
here. And now that we're here, this is what our states need, because the federal government gives money to the states, recycling our federal income taxes through this governor, and then the governor decides where to allocate that money in the state. And that's why so many Black public school systems suffer throughout the country, because those governors, they don't give proper funding to the Black public schools. And that's just one example.
Well,
So
see,
the benefit, as you said, the benefit would be to have control over state governments, and also, we have this situation where these police officers are murdering us. It's not accidents. It's flat out murder. They're murdering us at will, and nothing's done. And if something's done, it's a slap on the wrist. If they outright commit murder, they might be brought up on manslaughter charges. If they're convicted, then they appeal. They might be out next year. So I believe that that would not happen in states where you have Black governors and Black senators, and it was a majority Black. If a police officer were to murder a citizen, that police officer will be held accountable. That's another example. I could be here until the sun goes down talking about the benefits of us controlling our own states.
right. See, but I think that's going to have to be the pitch that you would have to give, for example, to get our people to want to move on their own without any type of economic assistance coming from a government or any kind of pitch like that, for the examples that you gave. Now,
Well,
see, at the
the
beginning
people
of
who
the,
aren't in the position, like you talk about the people who might not be entrepreneurs, or they may not have professional positions where they can work remotely.
right,
With the exception of some people who might have some really good trade or blue collar jobs, a lot of these people are unemployed or underemployed anyway. either they don't have a job or they're working in retail. There's retail down south, and you can be unemployed down south. If you living in your grandmama basement in the north, what's the difference between living in your grandmama basement in the south?
Well, see, that's why I'm saying you would have to convince them as well that they would be better off, living in the South, given their current circumstances and challenges where they are. Now, you see,
Well,
at the beginning of the program, and I wrote this down. You identified yourself as a Southerner from the North. Okay. Now you may be somewhat odd in that case, because I think that there are a lot of Black people who live in northern and western areas of the United States who do not want to move south for varying reasons. They're afraid to move south. They think the South doesn't have infrastructure. They think that the South is just a place that's still inundated visibly by the Ku Klux Klan. They think the South is backwards, et cetera. All kinds of misperceptions, and that's why I brought up about the
I,
BMW being in South Carolina and
I don't
Airbus
know.
being in Alabama. So
I
how
don't
do you
know.
address that?
Based on my observation, I think that the only Northerners that may think that are probably in the New York area. Um, they tend to think that anybody who lives outside of the New York Philly area, for whatever reason, is I guess backwards or behind. I don't think that the majority of Black folks in the North um, think like that. I mean, and a lot of us, like I say, the same, it's got the same situation. Like the rapper Kanye West, he was born in Atlanta,
Mm-hmm.
and he makes that known, even though he has love for Chicago, and now he lives in Colorado. So it's a lot. I'm not like the only, I'm not like, I'm not so rare. It's a lot of us with Southern ties and love the South. Like I was saying, like everybody who is probably over the age of 45 remember the Freaknik days. Remember when the South took over hip hop, the Dungeon Family, Organized Noise, and So Def, and all we wanted to do was move down south. So
So what about, for example, right now the Biden administration, had made some overtures and gestures, and perhaps they are working on this in actuality to make 11 million people who are part of DACA or who might be undocumented workers in the United States have a pathway to citizenship.
well,
Um,
I think it's two ways
what
to
do you
look at
think
that.
this will do to move to? How will this affect Black people here already in terms of employment? And would the move south for us help to kind of buffer that effect of making 11 million undocumented workers citizens in terms of job competition, if we don't have a geographic region in which we concentrate on as our majority cultural hub?
There's two ways to look at that. It's a way to look at it strictly from an African American perspective, and it's a way to look at that from right and wrong. From an African American perspective, that's bad. It's very bad. Um, from just general perspective of right and wrong, um, this is their land. Um, it's like even if they come from Mexico, and who's to say where Mexico starts and stops at? So this is their land. I mean, it would be to me, it would be no different than you know me moving to the continent of Africa. some people there say, "Oh, you're competing with me," but but that's still my land. I understand. Yeah, competition sucks, but I'm from there, and
Mm-hmm.
those Mexicans, this is their land. Mexico is part of North America, correct? So
Mm-hmm.
this is their land. So
So you don't buy
yeah,
the
for us it sucks. For us it might suck, but it's I'm not gonna say it's wrong because this is their land, and what we have to do is just man up and not complain about what somebody else is getting. We need to just be focusing on what we are supposed to be getting.
so these groups of black people who are saying they're indigenous, this is already their land. I want to throw them in along with, and I wrote down here as you were talking, the ADOS movement, the cultural nationalists, the B1 people, the black people who say the FBA, black people who say they're indigenous. Will the move south in some way be a movement you think that all these people could rally around because it seems to be a United States based solution where we're on this same land, irrespective of what these groups ideologically
Well,
believe.
well, that's one of the main reasons why I'm not saying I came up with the idea because, like I said, you wrote it in your book, and a lot of other people have the same idea. But that is one of the reasons why my thought pattern goes that way. I know it's a lot of people; they're not going to step foot in Africa, and like I said, we are very emotional people. So for whatever reasons, they hate Africa, they hate themselves, and
Mhm.
you can't convince them otherwise. And so I think it will work for those people. I think the cultural aspect that I would like to introduce, that might be some resistance as far as learning Kiswahili and taking on African names or whatever. But or even calling it New Nubia, they might have oppositions to that. But I mean, what I could say about those people, they, as confused and misguided as they are, for those of you that might be listening, for you to make the claims that you're making, it's no different from the Afrikaners in South Africa. You're being just like them. Those people, those Afrikaners in South Africa, they are from Europe. Their descendants are from Europe. They lied and they said in the school system, they taught the African people that they were there too, and that they are original people of the land of South Africa. And to us from the outside looking in, we are like, these people are delusional and crazy. And that's exactly how you sound when you say that your people came from this land. I'm not saying that there's not evidence of an African presence in the United States prior to the slave trade, but those were still Africans.
I want to go back to an important point that you made. I want you to remake it again, even though I heard it. Um, when I brought up the notion about the Biden administration wanting to make 11 million undocumented people have a pathway to citizenship, and you said, well, the people who are Mexican primarily, and people who are even further south of Mexico who are moving here, coming undocumented, etc. You said that this was their land anyway, and so from an African American perspective, um, yeah, that would be bad in terms of competition for jobs. We just got to man up and say, well, it's their land, so we got to do the best we can in our geopolitical existence here. And you made the point that yeah, competition sucks, but it's their land. And then you made a counterpoint to then say, well, if you went to the continent, and I guess you were saying somebody from the continent said, well, why should you come here? You would make the case that regardless as to whether you were not physically born on the continent, but the continent is your land. So nobody from the continent should tell you you don't belong somewhere on the continent. just as no one should tell people who are Hispanic who've been displaced or living other places that they don't belong in this space. I want to make sure that I was clear on the point that you were making. And if you had any additional comments to that, because I have a strange feeling when I see a number of these groups, let's say the people who call themselves indigenous, that they believe that they are the so-called Native Americans, and they don't see Africa as their land, so they're trying to claim an indigenousness here for purposes of reparations. And from what you're saying, you would say that they are wrong to claim an over indigenousness here, like the Afrikaner is wrong by trying to make it seem like they were always in Southern Africa and that they are as indigenous as Zulu people or the Petty or Xhosa or whatnot. I want to make sure that I'm getting the point that you are making, and if I didn't clarify it for me, but if I did, if you want to expound in any way on something I may have said regarding that.
I think that was a good summary. I didn't hear anything that stuck out that will be contrary with the idea that I was trying to get across. I just would like to say to my brothers and sisters who have been led astray by personalities such as Dane Calloway and whatnot to a lot of things sound good. I can come up with a conclusion. I can just say the sky is red, and if I spend
Mm-hmm.
enough time on it, I can come up with pages and pages and pages of a thesis to explain why the sky is red, and a lot of people who read that, it will start to make sense, But the truth is, if you were from here, you would still know your language. And people say, well, we went through slavery, we were whipped and this and that. No, if you're in your land, there's certain things is just going to stay that way. The people in the Congo went through the worst human experience ever. I would argue that what Leopold did to them, I mean, a lot of Africans don't want to hear what Leopold did to the people in Congo. In my opinion, that shit was worse than what we went through. But guess what? The people in the Congo still speak their languages, still know their traditions because why? They're at home. And if
Right.
you were at home, you would still know your culture. You would still know your languages. You wouldn't even have to research it. It would just have been passed down your parents. You can't beat that out of the people when they're at home. I mean, in Congo, those people were getting their hands and feet cut off by the day. I mean, it's picture they were collecting hands and feet, and those people still speak their language and they still know their culture because they're at home. So for people to think that they are from here, but they're speaking English and they have English names, and is just not logical. You're not using your brain. You're being a follower. You're being emotional because you were taught to hate Africa. And Malcolm said you can't hate roots of a tree and not hate the tree, and people don't like to hear the word self-hate and hate, but that's what it is, and that's you're not being logical, and because you want to be something other than yourself, then people come out with far reaching conspiracy theories like a Dan Calloway, and it sounds good to you, it appeals to your emotion, and you go with that. But I just want to say, wake up.
Does it appeal for, well, I want to say also that that's reported that Belgium still has chocolates in the shapes of hands. Of
Yes,
apple.
I've seen the video on that. They still serve that at their bakeries right now.
Right. Well, do you think that the Dane Calloway rhetoric, are you saying that the Dane Calloway rhetoric gets traction and appeal because many of our people do not want to be African? So any
Exactly.
escape out of that causes them to believe things that are untrue.
Yes. Yes. That's exactly what I'm saying. I mean,
Okay.
if you had a parent, that that you did not like, you did not like your parent, right? And then one of your relatives pulls you to the side and said, you adopted, right? You believe that shit.
Because
That's what you've
you
been
so
waiting.
patiently
That's
abused
what
from the
you've been
parent.
waiting to hear. That's what you've been waiting to hear your whole life.
Right. So anything other than African,
Yeah,
anything other than African,
yeah, yeah,
want to be anything else.
yeah. That's true,
Mm-hmm.
man. And that's why I say that we should visit. I'm not saying everybody should move, but just like the Muslims have Hajj to Mecca, African American people should make a pilgrimage to some part of Africa, some part in their life, sometime in their life, at least once. Because if you do that, you will see, how much people there look like you. There's a variety of different looking people. Yes, there are people that you can look at and you can tell they weren't born in the United States. Then there's also people that you will run into on the continent and you would think they have to be from the United States. And you will approach them and begin a conversation and find out that they have been on the continent since the beginning of the time, and they just look just like your twin brother or twin sister.
Right. I think that that in the realism of things, I think that we need people in a variety of spaces. Those people who are here, we need our people who are here with an Africa plan as well. In other words, I think that the moves back south is good, but I think that's a temporary or component solution. We need an Africa plan as well. And I think that the move back south can be incorporated into a larger African plan, dual citizenship, exchange of resources between here and the continent, trade, et cetera, et cetera. Uh, I think but I think that some people gravitate now, even some of the groups that I mentioned who might be for the back south plan, even though it is a plan that I think connects cultural nationalists, some Pan-Africanists, ADOS, the native people who consider themselves to be native indigenous. It is a plan that can cause a rallying point. And some of the people believe in the plan because they don't want any affiliation with Africa, but the back south plan seems like the only thing they can do to gain power here, even though they reject any linkage with Africa. But that being said, I think that we need an Africa plan, period, regardless of the validity of the back south plan in general. That's what I kind of wanted to say in regard to that. Um, did you by chance, as we're talking, did you by chance see any other comments
No, that it
that
was we actually only had that one person in the comment section, and and after I basically said that African soldiers fought in the Civil War and won the major battles and freed ourselves. That person became belligerent, so I had to block them.
Mhm. I want to say one more thing to you, if I could. I certainly have enjoyed our conversation, and I remember prior to us putting the show together today that you mentioned to me, and I know you wouldn't necessarily bring this up, but I am. You kind of mentioned that, hey, I'm planning, I mean I'm planning to move to Kenya very soon, and I'm repatriating. So why would people even want to listen to me talking about a back south plan when I don't even intend to be here in the U.S. for much longer? And you said, wouldn't people think that I was a hypocrite? And I said, no, I don't think, I think some people could think that, but I don't think that's valid at all. And I'll tell you the reason why and just kind of get your comments on it. See, as I said, I think we need an Africa plan, period. So just because people are moving back south does not mean that a person cannot be in the United States and want or get or desire dual citizenship in Africa. That's the first thing. The second thing is, even if somebody moves to the continent, that doesn't mean that they can't have a business that connects back in the United States. It doesn't mean that they don't have family in the U.S. because as African people and as the diaspora, we're all over the world for varying reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Some having to do with the historical slave trade, the land slave trade, as along with the Arab slave trade, and then we have more recent migrations of people moving to varying countries on their own more recently, post primarily the 1960s. So therefore, since people are all over, it doesn't mean that they don't have family in other parts of the world, and it doesn't mean that they don't care about others of us who are in different spaces than where one may currently reside. So therefore, I think that you are very valid to make, a comment and an observation about the African people from which you come from directly, about our plight and where we are, geographically. And I think that I think that's a valid point, and I'm making that observation. But I want to see if you have any thoughts about that, since I did raise that.
Okay, yeah. I just know a lot of times people look for contradictions. They really do. Sometimes they look for contradictions that don't even exist. And sometimes they may not be of ill intention. It's just that they can't wrap their brains around complex ideas. They may not be able to understand how a person could be in favor of one thing, but at the same time be in favor of something else that may seem to them to be in opposition. So what I try to do, like my hero is Malcolm X, and he always kept things simple. He kept things plain, and you know I would like to think that whether or not he wrote his speeches down, that he might have thought about um, what a person would say um, to negate ideas that he was bringing forth, and you may want to eliminate that. So sometimes I feel like certain things I might not even bring up because um, I know that you're going to have the naysayers that is going to want to poke the holes in it. They want to poke the holes in it. It's like if if you tell a person, oh, I just quit smoking. A lot of times, you got people to say, well, yeah, you just quit smoking, but you still eat meat. Man, I can't get a congratulations because I quit smoking. You know what I'm saying? And that's the way how people tend to be sometimes. You always looking for a way not to agree, a reason not to applaud, a reason not to be in cooperation with, a reason not to cooperate with. So that's why I was hesitant about doing this because people would be like, "Oh, well, he's Team Africa Worldwide, he's Team Swahili Worldwide." Every time I look up on his social media, he's taking trips to Africa. How is he going to tell us to move to the south? So that's I was coming from that frame of point because me myself, I felt like any person on earth can speak on anything, but it's like whether or not you're going to be taken seriously is another thing.
Right, I appreciate that. Did you have any more ideas? I don't want to overexhaust your time. Um,
Yeah. I do have to wrap up. I got a family function coming up, but I just want to say that Africa for Africans, one Africa, one people. I think that I know that everybody is not going to move to Africa tomorrow, nor do they want to. And I know even if you want to, it's not an easy thing. If it were easy, I would already be there. And so I believe that this move to the southeast is our next best plan. I hope that we will consider it because we have to admit to ourselves the current situation that we're in, being spread out throughout the country, it has not worked for us and it is not working for us.
Right. I
And
do believe that the Southeast is Africa in the United States, and I think we
yeah,
can mobilize
and,
that and
and
maximize that
and before
for
we
the
say
best
that
future.
before we say it's not going to work or it can't work, let's do it. Let's do it. I hate when people always say something's not going to work, but we're not doing it. Like there are some people that say buying black doesn't work, but we're not buying black. So how do we know? Um, buy black, and then if after buying black for 10 years we still in the same situation, then we could say it didn't work. And so that's the same thing with this idea of moving to the southeast. Let's move to the southeast and let's see how it works. If it doesn't work, then you really got to jump on board and be a Pan African. Then, if the
Right.
move to the south doesn't work, because that's the only feasible plan that I can think of in the United States. If somebody else can think of something else, let me know. But if the plan of us all relocating to the southeast doesn't work, that really means that we need to be repatriating back to the motherland.
I agree. Well, thank you very much for your time today. I appreciate and am honored to have had an opportunity to interview you and to have a conversation with you by way of your channel here, Team Africa Worldwide. And thank you again, Ndugu, for allowing me to share an intellectual space and dialogue with you today.
All right, thanks, Kaka. It's always a honor. We just don't talk online. We're friends outside of social media, and you always be my big brother. I just want to say to everybody watching and Team Africa Worldwide, Asante Sana for watching, and Kwaheri Kwasasa, which means goodbye for now.
Tutawanana.